The note was taped to my suitcase, fluttering in the evening breeze as if it had every right to be there. "You are not welcome here." I recognized the handwriting immediately. My sister's. Sharp, precise, deliberately cruel. For a long moment, I stood at the front gate, still wearing the heels I'd traveled in. One suitcase rested beside me, another lay tilted on the dry grass. After a 14-hour flight and 2 months overseas, this was the homecoming waiting for me. No phone call. No message. No explanation. Just a handwritten rejection hanging from my luggage like a public warning. Inside the house, the lights glowed warmly. Through the curtains, I could hear laughter. My family's laughter. Not one person came outside. Not one person checked if I'd arrived safely. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply stood there until something deep inside me finally snapped into place. Then I picked up my bags, turned around, and walked away. Years later, people would ask when everything changed. It changed in that moment. Because instead of fighting for a place where I wasn't wanted, I chose something else. I chose silence. I drove straight to the one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the one nobody knew existed. I had purchased it years ago under another name, paying cash. An escape route. A backup plan. A place that belonged entirely to me. That night, I unlocked the door, carried my suitcases inside, and disappeared. No calls. No social media. No dramatic goodbye. I simply vanished. They thought they had thrown me away. What they didn't realize was that I'd already begun pulling away long before they pushed me out. Now all that remained was the consequence. The apartment was cold, sparse, and almost empty. Yet somehow it felt more like home than the house I'd just left behind. I hadn't stayed there in nearly a year. Not since I'd started paying for my parents' renovations. Not since I'd cleared my sister's debts. Not since I'd quietly stepped in to cover mortgage payments they promised were only temporary. Back then they called me their rock. Their reliable daughter. The one who always saved the day. Now they couldn't even send a text message. I sat alone at the small kitchen table and stared at my phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No apologies. No one asking where I was. And that silence told me everything. Slowly, I opened a folder hidden deep within my encrypted drive. The folder was named. For later. Inside were 6 years of receipts. Bank transfers. Wire confirmations. Loan documents. Mortgage records. Every dollar I'd ever spent helping my family. I had kept everything. Every sacrifice. Every bailout. Every promise they'd conveniently forgotten. Then I reached into my drawer and pulled out a burner phone. Nobody in my family knew the number. I dialed. The call connected on the second ring. "Hey, Darren." A pause. Then his familiar voice. "Camille, about time." I looked out the apartment window into the darkness. "I'm ready." Another pause. Then a chuckle. "So the answer's finally yes? Tell your people we're moving forward." The laugh on the other end grew louder. "Took you long enough." I didn't laugh back. Because unlike Darren, I already knew exactly where this road ended. 2 mornings later, he arrived in a matte black SUV. He didn't ask about the luggage. Didn't ask questions. Just handed me a coffee and said, "Your attorney's waiting." The city drifted past outside the window as we drove downtown. My thoughts never left that note. The handwriting. The certainty. The arrogance. My sister truly believed I had nowhere else to go. She had no idea who I'd become. For more than 2 years, I'd been working quietly with a private development group, acquiring distressed properties across the county. Everything hidden behind layered companies and carefully constructed ownership structures. Invisible. Untouchable. Untraceable. And now, for the first time, I was about to use that power for something personal. Darren glanced over. "Your parents' property." I met his eyes. "The refinance from last spring." I nodded. "Parcel 14B. He slid a document across the seat. "With a balloon payment they never settled." I opened the folder. Read every page. Then read it again. A slow smile touched my lips. Cold. Controlled. Dangerous. We purchased the debt yesterday, Darren said. I folded the paperwork carefully. My family taught me a lot. His eyebrow rose. Like what? How to lie. I folded the document again. How to take. Once more. How to pretend someone doesn't exist. The paper disappeared into my briefcase. Then I looked out the window and whispered. Now it's my turn to teach them something. After that, I became a ghost. No birthdays. No holidays. No family gatherings. I vanished completely. My sister posted selfies from my old bedroom as if she'd inherited it. My mother complained online about her ungrateful daughter. My father stopped mentioning my name entirely. To them, I was gone. But while they celebrated my absence, I was building something far more powerful. I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. While they hosted brunches and filmed cheerful family videos, I sat in meetings with inspectors, surveyors, attorneys, and city officials. The reports started coming back. Structural concerns. Foundation issues. Insurance risks. Code violations. The insurance company quietly reassessed coverage. The lender began making weekly calls. My father brushed them off. Just paperwork. I watched him say it from a conference room 2 floors above the bank department handling his file. He never looked up. Never noticed. Then one morning, a notice appeared on their front gate. Final warning. Payment demand, 14 days. That same afternoon, my sister posted another complaint online. Family is useless. People are so fake. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I closed the app. No response. No argument. No warning. Instead, I scheduled an appointment. The following Tuesday. 10 a.m. Sharp. I knew they'd all be home. And I knew exactly who would be knocking. At precisely 10 o'clock, the knock came. But it wasn't me standing on the porch. It was the city marshal. Alongside 2 officers. A building inspector. And an attorney carrying a bright orange envelope. My parents, still in their pajamas, opened the door. And for the first time, they discovered what happens when the person they discarded stops protecting them. My mother's scream echoed across the lawn the moment the notice was placed in her hands. The sound stopped everyone cold. My father immediately launched into an argument, his face turning red as he waved his arms at the city officials. There has to be a mistake. There isn't, the attorney replied calmly. The violations had been documented. The insurance policy had expired. A critical payment had been missed. And because of that missed payment, a payment I knew they would ignore, the lender had exercised its rights. The process was already underway. Nothing they said could stop it. Within 30 minutes, the family that had once treated me like an outsider was standing outside the house they thought they owned. My sister stood barefoot in the grass, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down her face. Who did this? She shouted. Who did this to us? That's when a black sedan pulled to the curb. The door opened. And I stepped out. A tailored navy dress. Dark sunglasses. An iced coffee in one hand. Complete calm. My sister's voice died instantly. My father stared as if he were seeing a ghost rise from the grave. Camille? I removed my sunglasses. Good morning. His expression shifted from confusion to horror. The realization was finally beginning to settle in. I offered a small smile. It's nothing personal. My attorney standing beside me glanced at the paperwork. Just business. The words landed harder than any insult ever could. The city officials stepped aside as I walked toward the front door. For the first time in my life, nobody could stop me from entering that house. Not because I was family. Because I was the owner. Inside, the reality was worse than I expected. The carpets were stained. Paint peeled from the walls. Utility notices covered the kitchen counter like abandoned junk mail. Neglect lived in every room. My parents had spent years assuming the house would always belong to them. That no matter what happened, Someone else would fix the problems. Someone else would pay the bill. Usually me. I walked through the hallway slowly. Every room carried a memory. Every corner reminded me of the girl who spent years trying to earn love she should have received freely. When I reached my childhood bedroom, I stopped. The bookshelf I had built with my grandfather was still there. Dust covered every shelf. My old photographs were gone. In their place sat piles of makeup, shopping bags, and random clutter. As if my existence had been packed away and replaced. My sister followed me upstairs. "You can't do this," she said. Her voice cracked. "You really think this makes you better than us?" I turned toward her. Slowly. Carefully. And for the first time, she looked afraid. "You made this easy." Silence. Nothing more needed to be said. Back downstairs, I placed a thick file on the dining room table. The same table where I had once sat through years of criticism, exclusion, and humiliation. The file contained everything. Bank records. Contracts. Corporate filings. Every document connected to the company they had built using my money. The company they later used to erase me. The irony was almost poetic. Years ago, they purchased the house through a shell corporation. A corporation funded in part by my investments. A corporation they assumed would always remain under their control. It didn't. Not anymore. Because months earlier, I had quietly acquired every controlling interest. Every share. Every vote. Every legal pathway. The corporation now belonged to one person. Me. They never read the fine print. They never imagined I'd spend years studying corporate law while they underestimated me. They never imagined the daughter they dismissed would become the most dangerous person in the room. Yet even then, I never raised my voice. I never insulted them. Never celebrated. Never sought revenge through cruelty. I simply looked at them and said, "You taught me how power works." My father swallowed hard. My mother looked away. And I paid attention. The locks were changed before sunrise. Everything was done legally. Professionally. Quietly. A moving company cataloged every item. Storage units were arranged. Paperwork was filed. No drama. Just procedure. Ironically, the official notice had already been delivered through their own attorney. Neither of them had bothered checking their email. The next afternoon, my father stormed into my office downtown. His face was red. His hands shook. And for a brief moment, I saw the same man who used to intimidate me when I was 16. The same voice. The same anger. The same expectation that fear would make me surrender. It didn't. "You're destroying this family." I leaned back in my chair. Calm. Unmoved. I thought I wasn't part of it. The words hit harder than I intended. My mother stood behind him. For the first time, she looked smaller somehow. Not weak. Just defeated. She stared at me and whispered, "You're doing this to your own blood?" Without speaking, I opened a drawer. Inside was a framed document. I placed it gently on the desk. 10 years earlier, she had signed it herself. The legal paperwork that removed me from ownership, rights, and decision-making authority. The document that officially declared I no longer belonged. I slid it toward her. "You made that decision." Her hands trembled. I stood. "You called me an outsider." My voice remained steady. I simply stopped pretending I was family. Neither of them had an answer. They left shortly afterward. And I returned to work. There were still contracts to review. Assets to transfer. Accounts to settle. The final pieces of their business empire were being liquidated. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. People think betrayal happens in a single moment. It doesn't. Real consequences unfold slowly. One decision. One signature. One ignored warning at a time. Months later, the silence felt different. Peaceful. No shouting. No criticism. No guilt disguised as obligation. Just quiet. For the first time in my life, I could hear my own thoughts. The company sale finalized this morning. Every client had been transitioned. Every debt paid. Every transaction documented down to the last cent. Everything was legal. Everything was ethical. Everything was complete. I even hired independent counsel to protect their interests throughout the process. That was the last act of kindness I would ever offer them. Now they live in a modest apartment across town. And I live in a place no one can take from me. A place built on truth instead of manipulation. A place built on my own choices. My therapist asked me recently what justice felt like. I thought about it for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because I won. Not because they lost. But because I was finally free. Free from proving myself. Free from begging for acceptance. Free from shrinking so others could feel larger. Years ago, they told me I didn't belong. At the time, it felt like rejection. Now I understand it was a gift. Because the moment they pushed me out, they unknowingly gave me permission to build something of my own. And this time, every brick carries only one name. Mine. Like and subscribe my channel. Please kindly request my channel subscribe more storytelling videos. Thanks watching.